Welcome back to another episode of Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia, and this week on the podcast, we are going to review inflation data. We had inflation data release earlier this week on Tuesday, February the 13th. The stock market reacted. It was not happy with the information that came out. Every single month, we receive data known as CPI data. CPI is also known as the Consumer Price Index. CPI is data that is used by the feds and economists to get a pulse on inflation. We've talked about CPI data several times on the podcast, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but just as a reminder, CPI measures the change in prices paid for goods and services over a period of time. For example, it measures the price of steak, the price of eggs, the price of ham, the price of housing, the price of electricity, the price of gas, and then it determines on average, gathering all those numbers, how much prices are increasing on a month-to-month basis and on an annual basis. Very similar to earnings calls, where you have analysts that are analyzing how much a publicly traded company is going to bring in on revenue or bring in on earnings per share. You also have economists that are looking at inflation data and projecting whether or not it's going to increase, decrease, or stay at the same rate. In addition to that, you have the Federal Reserve that is looking at this information and determining whether or not they are going to increase interest rates, decrease them, or keep them at the same rate. A lot is weighing on CPI data. So with this last data release, we saw that CPI increased by 0.3% in the month of January. This means that on average, everything we are spending money on is 0.3% more expensive than it was in the month prior. And I know 0.3% doesn't sound like a lot, but if you take into consideration an increase in pricing month after month after month, then you start to feel it. I know I can feel it when I go to the grocery store. Cooking a meal in my home is becoming more expensive. This is eating away at our disposable income. And you already know who this is affecting the most. Honestly, y'all, I am so tired of saying that. I am so tired of saying how people of color are impacted the most. I was going to say with these types of issues, but honestly, the more I understand the world around me, the more I understand that everything that is impacting the United States of America is impacting people of color at a higher rate. It doesn't matter what the category, what the issue, what the topic, and it's exhausting. I know that I'm going to move through this inflation. I know that you're going to move through this inflation, but I also am cognizant that not everybody has the privilege to move through it. This is why having these conversations and getting to spend this time with you is so important to me. It means a lot to me to be able to have a platform where we can talk about this in a safe space and educate ourselves. I'm educating myself every single day. I know that you all are coming through and educating yourself as well. It's important for us to understand this so that we can, again, I've been saying this over and over, move through this strategically with an understanding. I digress. I got sidetracked. I got upset. The point is that CPI data is up 0.3% for the month. And year over year, the increase is 3.1%. Now, economists were expecting a 0.2% increase for the month of January and a 3.2 increase year over year. So there is a slight positive there that at least year over year, we were down from expectations 0.1%, but it is still a 3.1% increase year over year. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, I'm going to get into understanding disinflation versus deflation. There's a lot of misinformation and confusion surrounding inflation data. Investees, we are just 2 weekends away from Wealth Warrior, the course. This course takes place over a weekend on a Saturday and on a Sunday. We spend 5 hours together on Saturday and 5 hours together on Sunday, where I go into depth on everything you need to know about the stock market and how to get started. If you don't know anything at all about the stock market, then this is the perfect course for you. Know that I made it specifically for you so that you can process and understand the information. You get to keep the course for the rest of your life so you can revisit it as many times as you need. Head over to inloosewetrust.com, click on the menu, look at Wealth Warrior, the course. Check out all of the detail information, testimonies, the curriculum, all of that stuff is on there for you. I look forward to seeing you on February 24th and 25th. Investees, we are back. I want to talk about deflation and disinflation because there's a really big misconception as we are looking into economic data. And I want us to really understand what is taking place so that we can have clarity. Inflation is not as high as it was a couple of years ago. It's not as high as it was several months ago. And so there's this understanding that, oh, it's not as high as it was, so it must be coming down. While that is kind of true, it's also not true at all. Disinflation is what we are experiencing. And disinflation is when the price growth slows down. So, for example, we just had a 3.1% increase in CPI. This means that inflation is growing still at a 3.1% rate. It doesn't mean that we are necessarily lowering. We still have the accumulated inflation of the past. We're not deducting that number. We're just increasing by that percentage. Look at it as like a building block. If last year or a couple of years ago we increased by 8%, now we're only increasing by 3%. We don't deduct the 3% from the inflation we already experienced. Again, disinflation occurs when price growth slows down after a period of high inflation. What we are experiencing is disinflation. Prices are not coming down. On average, they are simply just not getting as expensive as they were previously. Deflation is when prices are decreasing. We're not experiencing a decrease in prices. We are experiencing disinflation, meaning that inflation is not as high as it once was month over month. We continue to see prices go up. Now, this is on average. Remember that they are taking all of the prices from the things that we spend money on, like electricity, eggs, ham, and they are compiling this and taking the average increase that is taking place month over month. then they come out with the CPI data. The stock market had some feelings about the CPI data. It was very upset. All three indexes, in fact, across the board, the stock market dropped. We hadn't seen drops like these since March of 2023. Granted, we also have to take into consideration that the stock market was on a win. I mean, it was performing really great, except for what we saw at the start of January, but it quickly started to recover. And so it pulled back. It took a breather, which I think is really important. It's nothing to get alarmed about. In fact, just the week before on Friday, the S&P 500 hit a new all-time high at 5,000 points, which is a really big deal. Anytime an index hits a round number like 5,000, it's a psychological point of reaction. It is a level of support or becomes a level of resistance. We surpassed the 5,000 on Monday and we sat above it, and then CPI data came in and we came tumbling down. It could be that this 5,000 point level will now be a point of resistance. We don't know, meaning we have to see if the S&P 500 is able to push through that or if it's going to struggle pushing through that, because round numbers do have a psychological effect on investors. So this is the latest stock market and economic update. Again, I feel like it feels grim like it did the last week, but what we're doing right now is we're going through a period of learning, and we can't avoid the negative and expect to be on top, expect to have generational wealth if we don't understand how the system works. And in every single system, there are positives and there are negatives, and we need to be able to process this information. I know I got upset. I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of it affecting our people, which is why we are here week after week and we produce content to educate our community members. My name is Linda Garcia. I am your host. Investies is a Cosmic Standard and In Lose We Trust production. A special thank you to the team, Asia Simpson, Eliza Smith, and Jacob Winnick.